The rain hammered against the barn roof like 1,000 drumbeats, drowning out everything except the sound of Cole's voice cutting through the storm. "No one else will ever fill you like I do, Ryan. No one." His words hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore, while water dripped from his black Stetson onto the hay-strewn floor. My back was pressed against the rough wooden wall, his massive frame towering over me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment I realized my best friend had been in love with me all along, and I'd been too blind, or too terrified, to see it. But let me take you back to where it all started 3 months ago, when Cole Jameson walked into my life and turned my entire world upside down. I'd always thought I had my life figured out. At 23, I was working as a veterinary assistant in a small town called Meadowbrook, population barely scraping 4,000. My days consisted of routine checkups on cattle, the occasional emergency call for a horse with colic, and evenings spent alone in my small apartment above the hardware store. I dated occasionally, mostly women my mother set me up with, but nothing ever stuck. I told myself I was focused on my career, on saving money to eventually open my own practice. The truth was simpler and more complicated. I'd never felt that spark everyone talked about, that electricity, that sense of coming alive when someone walked into a room. Until Cole Jameson bought the old Blackwater Ranch on the edge of town. The ranch had been abandoned for nearly a decade, a sprawling 1,000-acre property with a main house that needed serious renovation, multiple outbuildings in various states of decay, and fencing that had seen better days. When word spread that someone had actually purchased the place, the entire town buzzed with curiosity. Who would take on such a massive project? Who had that kind of money and ambition? The answer came on a scorching Tuesday morning in late June when my boss, Dr. Morrison, sent me out to do a wellness check on the ranch's newly acquired livestock. I drove my beat-up truck down the long gravel driveway, dust clouds rising in my wake, and my first thought when I saw the main house was that whoever bought this place was either incredibly optimistic or slightly insane. The two-story farmhouse desperately needed paint, several shutters hung at odd angles, and the wraparound porch sagged in places. But there was something charming about it, too. The mature oak trees providing shade, the distant mountains creating a postcard-perfect backdrop, the sense of possibility that clung to the property like morning dew. I parked near the largest barn and grabbed my medical bag, expecting to meet some retired couple looking for a quiet place to spend their golden years. Instead, I found Cole Jameson. He stepped out of the barn wearing faded jeans that sat low on his narrow hips, scuffed work boots, and a black t-shirt that stretched across shoulders so broad they could have carried the weight of the world. His black Stetson was pulled low, shadowing his face, but I could see the strong line of his jaw, darkened with several days' worth of stubble. When he lifted his head and our eyes met for the first time, something inside my chest did this weird flip that I'd never experienced before. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, amber and gold with flecks of green, and they studied me with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "You must be Ryan," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel underfoot. He extended his hand, and when I took it, his palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm without being aggressive. "Cole Jameson, appreciate you coming out on such short notice." His accent carried hints of Texas, a lazy drawl that made every word sound deliberate and important. I found myself staring at the way his lips formed words, at the small scar cutting through his left eyebrow, at the way he stood with easy confidence like he'd been born in cowboy boots. "Dr. Morrison mentioned you needed someone to check your livestock," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. Why was my heart racing? Why did my hand feel warm where he'd touched it? Cole nodded and gestured toward the barn. "Bought a dozen head of cattle from a ranch up north. Want to make sure they're all healthy before I integrate them with the rest of the herd." As we walked together into the dim coolness of the barn, he explained his vision for Blackwater Ranch. He wanted to build something sustainable, grass-fed cattle, a small dairy operation, maybe some chickens and goats for diversity. He planned to renovate the main house himself, rebuild the outbuildings, and eventually create a place that could sustain itself for generations. The passion in his voice was unmistakable, and I found myself drawn to it, to him, in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. I spent the next 2 hours examining each animal, taking notes, answering his questions about local feed suppliers and veterinary care. Cole proved to be an attentive student, watching everything I did with focused interest, asking intelligent questions that showed he'd done his research. But more than once, I caught him looking at me in a way that had nothing to do with livestock management. When our hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same clipboard, electricity shot up my arm. When he steadied me after I stumbled over some loose hay, his hand on my lower back felt like a brand. When he smiled, really smiled with his whole face lighting up, I forgot how to breathe. "Everything looks good," I told him as we finished up, trying to ignore the disappointment settling in my chest at the thought of leaving. "They're healthy animals. You got a good deal." Cole leaned against the barn door, arms crossed over his chest, and the sunlight streaming in behind him created a golden halo effect that seemed almost biblical. "I'm glad," he said, but he wasn't looking at the cattle. He was looking at me. "Dr. Morrison mentioned you might be willing to come out weekly for the next month or so, just to monitor things as I get settled." It wasn't a typical arrangement, but I found myself nodding before my brain caught up with my mouth. "Yeah, I can do that." "Good." That smile again, the one that made my stomach do somersaults. "I could use a friend out here, someone to keep me company while I work on this place." A friend. The word should have been reassuring, but instead it felt like both a promise and a limitation. I drove home that day with my windows down, country music blaring, trying to make sense of the confusion swirling in my mind. I'd never been attracted to a man before. I'd never even considered the possibility. I was straight. I dated women. I'd had girlfriends, even if none of them had lasted more than a few months. This thing with Cole, this magnetic pull, this awareness, it had to be some kind of fluke, an anomaly, a result of too many lonely nights and not enough social interaction. But that night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he moved with such casual grace despite his size, the way his laugh rumbled from deep in his chest, the way his eyes had lingered on my face like he was memorizing every detail. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself I was reading too much into simple friendliness. I told myself a lot of things that, even then, I knew weren't entirely true. The weekly visits quickly became the highlight of my schedule. Every Tuesday morning, I'd load up my truck and make the drive out to Blackwater Ranch, ostensibly to check on the livestock, but really just to spend time with Cole. He was always waiting for me, usually covered in sawdust or paint or whatever project had consumed his morning, and he'd greet me with that devastating smile that made my knees weak. We'd start with the animals, checking vitals, discussing nutrition, monitoring behavior, but those professional interactions always stretched into longer conversations. Cole had a way of drawing stories out of me that I'd never shared with anyone else. He wanted to know everything: why I chose veterinary medicine, what my childhood was like growing up in Meadowbrook, what my dreams were beyond this small town. I found myself telling him about my father, who died when I was 17, and how that loss had shaped my cautious approach to life. I told him about my mother, who meant well but whose constant matchmaking attempts made me feel like a disappointment. I told him about the loneliness that sometimes felt like a physical weight, the sense that I was waiting for something without knowing what. In return, Cole shared pieces of his own story. He'd grown up on a ranch in West Texas, the youngest of 3 brothers. His family had owned their land for 4 generations. But a combination of drought, debt, and bad luck had forced them to sell when Cole was 25. He'd spent the next 5 years working on other people's ranches, saving every penny, dreaming of the day he could have his own place again. Blackwater represented everything he'd been working toward: a fresh start, a chance to build something lasting, a home. "Why here?" I asked one day as we sat on the porch steps of the main house, sharing a thermos of coffee during a break. "Why Meadowbrook? You could have bought land anywhere." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the mountains in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Sometimes you don't choose a place, it chooses you. The moment I drove through this town, something just clicked. Felt right, you know. He turned to look at me then, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't name. I wanted to ask what he meant. I wanted to understand the look on his face. But before I could find the words, he stood abruptly and announced it was time to get back to work. As the weeks passed, our friendship deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Cole started texting me outside of my official visits, photos of progress on the house, questions about local contractors, random observations about ranch life. I found myself checking my phone constantly, smiling at messages that ranged from mundane, "Can't figure out this damn electrical panel," to unexpectedly poetic, "Sunrise this morning looked like the sky was on fire. Made me think of you." That last text had sent me into a minor spiral. Why would a sunrise make him think of me? What did that mean? I started finding excuses to visit more often. If I finished my rounds early, I'd swing by the ranch. If I had a free Saturday, I'd offer to help with whatever project Cole was tackling. He never seemed surprised to see me, just pleased, like my presence was something he'd been hopping for. We fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side on fence repairs, painting the exterior of the house, organizing the barn. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying, and I loved the way we could work in comfortable silence or easy conversation, switching between the two without effort. But there were moments, small, charged moments, that left me confused and hyper-aware. Like when Cole would stand close behind me to demonstrate the proper way to hammer a nail, his chest pressed against my back, his breath warm on my neck. Or when he'd grab my hand to examine a cut I'd gotten on some rusty wire, his touch gentle despite his size, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin of my palm. Or when we'd collapse together on the porch after a long day, our shoulders pressed together, our legs stretched out, and he'd rest his head back against the house with a contented sigh that sounded almost intimate. "You're good at this," he told me one evening as we admired our progress on the house. We just finished repainting the entire exterior, and the fresh white with dark green trim looked magazine-worthy against the sunset. "Good at what? I'm just following your instructions." Cole shook his head, his expression serious. "No, I mean, you're good at being present, at showing up, at caring about things." He paused, and when he looked at me, there was something raw in his face. "I haven't had a lot of people in my life who just stayed, you stay." The vulnerability in his admission hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to close the distance between us. I wanted to tell him I wasn't going anywhere. I wanted to understand why my entire body seemed to lean toward him like a plant seeking sunlight. Instead, I just nodded and said, "You're easy to stay for, Cole." His smile in response was soft and sad and beautiful, and I filed that moment away in the growing collection of memories I replayed late at night when I was alone. Everything changed on a Friday night in early September. Cole had invited me to stay for dinner, a thank you for all the extra hours I'd been putting in. He'd grilled steaks on the newly repaired porch, made a surprisingly good salad, and pulled out a bottle of expensive bourbon he'd been saving for a special occasion. "What's the occasion?" I asked as we settled into the comfortable chairs he'd positioned to face the sunset. "Celebrating the ranch being officially operational," he said, pouring us each a generous measure. "And celebrating you. Couldn't have done this without you, Ryan." The bourbon was smooth and warm, and as the evening progressed, our conversation grew more personal, more honest. Maybe it was the alcohol lowering our inhibitions, or maybe it was the intimacy of the setting, just the two of us, the stars emerging overhead, the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Whatever the reason, Cole started telling me things I suspected he hadn't shared with many people. About the loneliness of the past 5 years. About the failed relationships he'd left behind. About the sense that he'd been searching for something he couldn't quite define. "Have you ever felt like you were waiting for your life to actually start?" he asked, his voice rough with bourbon and emotion. "Like you were just going through the motions, waiting for the real thing to begin?" "Yeah," I admitted, surprised by how much I related to his words. All the time. Cole turned in his chair to face me fully, and the look in his eyes was so intense I couldn't breathe. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me. Everyone around me seemed to have it figured out: relationships, happiness, that sense of contentment, but I could never connect with anyone. Not really. Not in a way that mattered. He paused, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. And then I met you. The world seemed to stop spinning. The crickets went silent. Even my heartbeat seemed to pause, waiting for his next words. Ryan, he ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. I need to tell you something, and I'm terrified it's going to ruin everything we've built. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep acting like you're just a friend when the truth is, I think about you constantly. When you're not here, I'm counting down the hours until you come back. When you are here, I have to physically restrain myself from touching you in ways that friends don't touch. Stop. The word came out harsher than I intended, panic flooding my system. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. Cole, I can't, I'm not. I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know how to finish it. What was I trying to say? That I wasn't attracted to him, that would be a lie. That I wasn't interested, also a lie. That I wasn't gay. But was that even true anymore? Cole stood too, his expression shifting from vulnerable to carefully neutral. It's okay, he said quietly. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. You didn't, I'm not. I was fumbling, my thoughts a jumbled mess. I need to go. I practically ran to my truck, ignoring Cole calling my name. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, standing on his porch, that black Stetson in his hands, looking absolutely gutted. The image haunted me all the way home. That night was the worst of my life. I paced my small apartment for hours, my mind replaying Cole's confession over and over. He had feelings for me. Real, romantic feelings. And the terrifying part wasn't that I was repulsed or shocked. The terrifying part was that somewhere deep in my chest, in a place I'd been carefully ignoring for months, I felt the same way. But admitting that meant admitting everything I'd believed about myself was wrong. It meant confronting questions I'd spent 23 years avoiding. It meant stepping into uncertainty and fear and a future I couldn't predict. I thought about the way my mother talked about finding me a nice girl. I thought about my friends from high school, all married to women now, posting pictures of bobbies and suburban houses. I thought about the life I was supposed to want, supposed to have. And then I thought about Cole. The way his smile lit up his entire face. The way his laugh rumbled through my chest when he stood close. The way he looked at me like I was something precious and important. The way my entire world felt more colorful, more alive, more real when he was in it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I searched the internet for answers. I read articles about sexuality. I watched videos of people sharing their coming out stories. I visited forums where men described realizing they were gay or bisexual later in life. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to recognize myself in those stories. The lack of genuine attraction to the women I dated. The way I'd always found excuses to avoid physical intimacy. The sense that I was performing a role rather than living authentically. The sudden, overwhelming, undeniable attraction to Cole Jameson. By the time the sun rose, I hadn't reached any definitive conclusions about my identity. But I had realized one crucial truth. I couldn't lose Cole. Whatever this thing between us was, whatever it meant, I needed to at least explore it. I needed to be honest with him and with myself. But fear is a powerful thing, and despite my midnight revelations, I couldn't bring myself to reach out. Days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. I avoided the ranch, sending Dr. Morrison out for the regular checkups. I ignored Cole's texts, first concerned, then hurt, then finally stopping altogether. I told myself I needed time to think, to process, to figure things out. In reality, I was running, hiding, choosing fear over possibility. 3 weeks after that disastrous dinner, I ran into Cole in town. I was grabbing groceries after work, exhausted and miserable when I turned a corner and nearly collided with a broad chest. I looked up into those amber eyes I'd been dreaming about and my heart stopped. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, his usual easy smile nowhere in sight. Ryan. My name sounded heavy in his mouth, weighted with all the things we hadn't said. "Hey, Cole." My voice came out rough, uncertain. We stood there in the middle of the produce aisle, other shoppers moving around us, and the silence stretched painful and taut. "How have you been?" he asked finally, and I recognized the question for what it was, a peace offering, an attempt to bridge the gap I'd created. "Okay, busy with work, you know how it is." The lies tasted bitter on my tongue. "And you, how's the ranch?" Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment maybe, or resignation. "Good, everything's running smooth. The cattle are healthy. House is almost finished." He paused, and I watched him wage some internal battle before adding quietly, "It's lonely, though." Turns out building a dream isn't much fun when you're doing it alone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Before I could respond, a woman's voice called out, "Cole, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." I turned to see a beautiful brunette approaching, all long legs and perfect smile. She slid her arm through Cole's with easy familiarity, and jealousy, hot and immediate and shocking in its intensity, flooded my system. "Ryan, this is Melissa Harper," Cole said, his voice carefully neutral. "She's helping me with some interior design for the house." "Melissa, this is Ryan Foster. He's the vet who helped with the livestock." "Oh, the vet." Melissa's smile was genuine and warm, which somehow made it worse. "Cole's mentioned you. It's so nice to finally meet you." She looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but polite enough not to comment. "Well, we should probably get going. We have that appointment with the furniture store in 20 minutes. Cole nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "Yeah, we should go." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but Melissa was already tugging him toward the exit. "Nice meeting you, Ryan," she called over her shoulder. I stood frozen in the produce aisle, staring at the empty space where Cole had been, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Who was Melissa Harper? How long had they been spending time together? Were they dating? The thought made me physically ill. I abandoned my groceries and drove straight home, my mind spinning with scenarios I didn't want to imagine. That night I broke. I pulled out my phone and stared at Cole's contact information for a solid 10 minutes before finally typing out a message. "I'm sorry for running. Can we talk?" The three dots indicating he was typing appeared almost immediately, making my heart race. But they disappeared, then appeared again, then disappeared. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his response came. "I don't think that's a good idea, Ryan. You made your feelings pretty clear. I'm trying to move on. You should too." Move on to Melissa Harper, presumably. The thought was like acid in my veins. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I wanted to drive to the ranch and demand he listen to me. I wanted to turn back time and handle that night differently. Instead, I did what I'd been doing for weeks. I ran. I threw myself into work, accepting every extra shift Dr. Morrison offered. I volunteered for emergency calls. I did anything to avoid the gaping hole in my chest where Cole used to fit. My mother noticed the change in me, commenting on how withdrawn I'd become. My friends from high school invited me out for drinks, but I made excuses. Food lost its taste. Sleep became elusive. I was miserable, and I had no one to blame but myself. 2 months after I'd run from Cole's confession, I was called out to an emergency at a ranch on the other side of the county. A horse had gotten tangled in barbed wire and needed immediate attention. I worked for 3 hours in the cold November rain, suturing wounds and calming the panicked animal, and by the time I finished, I was soaked to the bone and exhausted. I was driving home, barely paying attention to the road, when my truck skidded on a patch of black ice. I overcorrected, and suddenly I was spinning, the world a blur of headlights and darkness. The truck slammed into a ditch with a sickening crunch of metal, and then everything went still. I wasn't seriously hurt, some cuts and bruises, nothing major, but my truck was totaled and I was stranded on a rural road with no cell service and rain pouring down like the sky was trying to drown the world. I started walking, hopping to find somewhere with a signal, and that's when headlights appeared behind me. A truck pulled over, and when the driver's door opened, my heart stopped. Of course. Of course it was Cole. Jesus Christ, Ryan. He was out of the truck and in front of me in seconds, his hands on my shoulders, his eyes scanning me for injuries. "Are you okay? What happened? Where's your truck?" I crashed back there. "I'm fine, just some." He wasn't listening. He was already guiding me to his truck, practically lifting me into the passenger seat. He grabbed a blanket from the back and wrapped it around my shivering body, then cranked the heat to full blast. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice rough with something that might have been fear or anger or both. He reached out with gentle fingers to examine the cut on my forehead, and at his touch, something inside me shattered. "Cole," I whispered, and suddenly I was crying. Not pretty, dignified tears, but ugly, gulping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. Without a word, Cole pulled me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other wrapped around my back. He held me while I fell apart, murmuring soft reassurances that I barely heard over the sound of my own anguish. "I'm sorry," I gasped out between sobs. "I'm so sorry, I ruined everything. I was scared and stupid and I ruined everything." "SHH," he soothed, his lips against my temple. "It's okay, you're okay, I've got you." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. I'd pushed away the best thing in my life because I was too afraid to face the truth about myself. "I miss you," I admitted, the words torn from somewhere primal. "Every day, Cole, I miss you so much it hurts." His arms tightened around me and I felt him press his face into my hair. "I miss you too," he admitted, his voice wrecked. "God, Ryan, I've missed you so much." We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the cab of his truck while rain drummed on the roof and the windows fogged with our breath. When I finally pulled back, Cole kept one hand on my face, his thumb brushing away the moisture on my cheek, rain or tears, I couldn't tell. "I need to get you to a hospital," he said. "Get you checked out properly." "Hospitals," I said firmly. "I'm fine, just take me home." He looked like he wanted to argue but eventually nodded. "Your place or mine?" The question hung heavy with implications. Your place meant maintaining distance, keeping up the walls I'd built. His place meant confronting everything I'd been running from. "Yours," I heard myself say. "If that's okay, I don't want to be alone tonight." Something shifted in his expression, hope, maybe, or determination. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Ryan, let's get you home." The drive to Blackwater Ranch was quiet except for the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Cole kept glancing over at me like he was afraid I might disappear, and I spent the entire drive trying to gather the courage to say the things I needed to say. The ranch house looked different now, complete. The exterior was freshly painted, lights glowed warmly from the windows and smoke curled from the chimney. This was no longer a fixer-upper, this was a home, Cole's home. And seeing it finished, seeing the dream he'd built, made my chest ache with longing to be part of it. He helped me out of the truck, keeping one arm around my waist like he thought I might collapse. Inside, the house was even more beautiful. The interior was all warm wood and comfortable furniture, with personal touches that screamed Cole, family photos on the mantel, books about ranching stacked on tables, a guitar leaning against the wall in the corner. "Guest room or?" Cole asked, but I shook my head. "I need to shower first. Get warm. Is that okay?" He nodded and led me upstairs to the bathroom, which had been completely renovated with a huge walk-in shower and modern fixtures. He grabbed fresh towels and what looked like his own clothes, soft flannel pajama pants and a worn t-shirt. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," he said, already turning to leave. "Cole, wait." I caught his wrist and he froze. "Thank you for stopping, for everything." He looked at my hand on his wrist, then up at my face, and the longing in his eyes was so naked it made me dizzy. "Always, Ryan, I'll always stop for you." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and trembling hands. The hot shower helped warm my body but did nothing to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. I stood under the spray for a long time, trying to organize my thoughts, trying to figure out what I wanted to say. But every practiced speech dissolved into simple truth. I wanted Cole. I needed Cole. I was in love with Cole. That last realization hit me like lightning. I was in love with him. Not just attracted to him, not just missing his friendship. I was completely, terrifyingly, irreversibly in love with him. And I had no idea if I'd already destroyed any chance of him loving me back. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, dressed in Cole's clothes that smelled like him and hung loose on my smaller frame, I followed the sound of movement to the kitchen. Cole was making tea, his back to me, and I took a moment to just look at him, really look at him. The way his shoulders filled out his t-shirt, the way his jeans hugged his thighs, the way he moved with such unconscious grace. "Feeling better?" he asked without turning around, and I wondered if he could sense my presence the same way I always seemed to sense his. "Yeah, thanks for the clothes." He turned then, 2 mugs in his hands, and nearly dropped them when he saw me. Something flashed across his face, heat, longing, pain, before he got it under control. "They look good on you," he said quietly, and the rasp in his voice made my skin prickle. We moved to the living room, settling on opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance maintained. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "Who's Melissa?" The question burst out before I could stop it, and I immediately wished I could take it back. Cole's eyebrows rose. "Melissa Harper. Yeah, the woman from the grocery store. You said she was helping with interior design." Cole studied me for a long moment, something calculating in his gaze. "She is. Her family owns the furniture store in town. She's been helping me pick out pieces for the house." "Are you dadding her?" My voice came out small, uncertain. Would it matter if I was? The question felt like a test. Yes, I admitted, it would matter a lot. "Why?" He set down his mug and shifted to face me fully. "Why would it matter, Ryan? You ran from me, you ignored me for weeks. You made it clear that whatever I felt, you didn't feel the same way. So why would it matter if I tried to move on?" "Because I lied," the words exploded out of me. "I lied, Cole, about everything, about not feeling the same way, about needing time, about all of it." I was shaking now, my hands clenched into fists. "The truth is, I've been attracted to you since the day we met. The truth is, you terrify me because I've never felt this way about anyone. The truth is, I think about you constantly. When I wake up, you're my first thought. When I go to sleep, you're my last thought. And every moment in between, I'm either thinking about you or trying desperately not to think about you because it hurts too much." Cole's expression shifted from guarded to openly stunned. "Ryan, I'm not done." I stood up, needing to pace, needing to move. "I was scared. I am scared. Because admitting I have feelings for you means admitting things about myself that I've spent my whole life avoiding. It means facing the fact that maybe I'm not who I thought I was. It means disappointing my mother and confusing my friends and stepping into a future I can't predict. It means being vulnerable and honest and brave. And Cole, I'm not brave. I'm a coward who ran instead of staying. I'm a coward who let fear win." I stopped packing and turned to look at him. He was standing now too, his expression unreadable, his body tense. "But here's the thing," I continued, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I would rather be scared and with you than safe and without you. I would rather face every fear, every doubt, every unknown if it means I get to be by your side. Because you, Cole Jameson, are worth being brave for." The silence that followed was absolute. Cole stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, and I watched a dozen emotions flicker across his face too quickly to identify. Then he moved. He crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, and suddenly his hands were on my face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. "Tell me you mean that," he demanded, his voice rough with desperation. "Tell me this isn't just because you saw me with Melissa or because you were scared tonight. Tell me this is real." "It's real," I breathed. "Cole, it's so real it scares me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be with you or what this means about me or—" "I don't care," he interrupted. "I don't care about labels or definitions or what this means for your identity. All I care about is you. Just you, Ryan. That's all I've ever cared about." His forehead dropped to rest against mine, and we stood like that, breathing the same air, our hearts racing in tandem. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the question was so sweet, so respectful despite the hunger I could see in his eyes that I nearly cried again. "Please," I whispered. "Cole, please." His lips met mine with a gentleness that contradicted his size. The kiss was soft, exploratory, asking questions and waiting for answers. But then I made a small sound in the back of my throat, and something in Cole snapped. The kiss deepened, his hands sliding from my face to my hair to my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I'd been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this intensity, this rightness, this sense of coming home. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against mine again. "I meant what I said that night," he murmured. "No one else will ever feel you like I do. No one else will ever know you like I know you. No one else will ever love you like I love you. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief, of joy, of overwhelming emotion. I love you too, I said, and saying the words felt like breaking free from chains I hadn't realized I was wearing. God, Cole, I love you so much. Say it again, he demanded, kissing my jaw, my neck, any skin he could reach. I love you, kiss. I love you, kiss. I love you, Cole Jameson. He pulled back just enough to look at me, and the emotion shining in his amber eyes made my knees weak. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that. Probably about as long as I've wanted to say it. I smiled, and for the first time in months the expression felt genuine. We moved back to the couch, but this time there was no careful distance. I ended up curled against his chest, his arms wrapped around me, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about his fears that I'd run again, about my lingering anxiety about what this meant for my identity, about how we'd navigate a relationship in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. I'm not good at this, I admitted as the night stretched toward morning. At relationships, I mean, I don't know how to be someone's boyfriend, especially when that someone is a man, Cole finished gently. I nodded against his chest. Hey, look at me. He waited until I tilted my head up to meet his gaze. We'll figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. Just us taking things one day at a time. And Ryan, I don't need you to have it all figured out. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest with me and to stay. Can you do that? Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I can do that. We fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, and when I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, my first thought wasn't panic or regret. It was peace. Cole was still asleep, his face relaxed and younger looking in repose, and I let myself just watch him for a while. This beautiful, patient, incredible man who'd somehow seen something in me worth waiting for, who'd given me space to run but had been ready to catch me when I finally came back. We had a long road ahead, conversations I'd need to have, discoveries I'd need to make about myself, challenges we'd face as a couple. But looking at Cole, feeling the solid warmth of him beside me, I felt ready to face all of it. When Cole finally woke, he opened his eyes to find me watching him, and his slow smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Morning, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. How long have you been awake? Not long, I said. I didn't want to move and wake you up. His arms tightened around me. I'm glad you stayed. Part of me was afraid I'd wake up and find you disappeared again. The vulnerability in his admission made my chest ache. I'd done that to him, made him doubt, made him fear. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. Not this time, not ever. We made breakfast together in his newly renovated kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that felt practiced despite being new. Cole cooked eggs while I made toast, and we kept stealing glances at each other like we couldn't quite believe this was real. Over coffee, sitting at his kitchen table with morning light pouring in, we had the practical conversations we'd avoided the night before. What about your mom? Cole asked carefully. How do you think she'll react? I sighed, thinking about my mother's endless parade of potential daughters-in-law. Honestly, I have no idea. She's going to be surprised, probably confused, maybe disappointed. And your friends, I shrugged. Most of them I've lost touch with anyway. The ones who matter, the ones who are really friends, they'll come around. I reached across the table to take his hand. What about you, your family? Something pained crossed Cole's face. I haven't talked to them in a while. When I left Texas, there were words. They thought I was running away from responsibility. They didn't understand why I couldn't just stay and help them rebuild. I've called a few times, but it's been awkward. Do they know you're gay? The question felt intrusive, but I needed to understand. Cole nodded. Yeah, they've known since I was 20. My brothers took it okay. They didn't care as long as I could still work the ranch. My parents struggled more. They're not hateful or anything, just traditional. They'd probably be happy to hear I found someone, but whether they'd accept it is another question. We sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating the challenges ahead. We don't have to tell anyone right away, Cole said finally. We can take our time, figure things out at our own pace. I don't want to hide you, I said firmly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I've spent too much of my life hiding already. I'm done with that. Pride and love shone in Cole's eyes. Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together. The rest of that day passed in a blissful haze. We stayed at the ranch, and Cole showed me all the improvements I'd missed during my weeks of absence. The finished master bedroom with its enormous bed and view of the mountains. The office he'd set up for managing ranch business. The den with comfortable furniture and a fireplace that he'd imagined hosting friends in. Every room reflected his taste, his personality, and I found myself imagining a future where I belonged here too. In the afternoon, we went for a walk around the property. Cole pointed out his plans for expansion, a chicken coop he wanted to build in the spring, a vegetable garden for summer, maybe even a small orchard eventually. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself offering suggestions, getting excited about possibilities. "You could have an office here too," Cole said suddenly as we stood looking at a flat area near the main house. "For when you eventually open your own practice. Build a veterinary clinic right here on the property. You could serve all the ranches in the area, be your own boss." The vision he painted was so clear, so tempting, that I could almost see it. A small building with examining rooms and surgical facilities, my own shingle hanging outside, a life built around both my career and my relationship with Cole. "That's a big step," I said carefully. "Moving in together, combining our lives like that." "I know," Cole agreed. "And I'm not saying it has to happen now or even soon. I'm just saying, when you're ready, there's a place for you here. Not as a guest or a visitor, but as a partner, someone who belongs." The offer sat heavy and warm in my chest, and I tucked it away to think about later when I wasn't still reeling from all the changes in my life. That evening we made dinner together again, and I marveled at how domestic it all felt. How right. I'd never experienced this kind of contentment in any of my previous relationships, this sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be, with exactly who I was supposed to be with. After dinner, we settled on the couch again, and this time when Cole pulled me close, I went willingly, eagerly. We kissed slowly, thoroughly, learning each other's preferences. His hand stayed respectful, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, and I loved him for that patience. "Thank you," I murmured against his lips. "For what?" "For waiting, for not giving up on me, for being so patient while I figured myself out." Cole cupped my face in his large hands, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "Ryan, you're worth waiting for. You're worth everything." We stayed up late talking about our pasts, our dreams, our fears. Cole told me about his first relationship, a ranch hand named Marcus who'd broken his heart when he chose a woman over Cole because it was easier. I told him about the women I'd dated, the guilt I'd felt when I couldn't give them what they wanted, the relief I'd felt when each relationship ended. "I always thought something was wrong with me," I admitted. "Why couldn't I fall in love like everyone else seemed to? Why didn't I feel that spark?" "And now?" Cole asked softly. "Now I know I was just waiting for the right person." I kissed him gently. "I was waiting for you." We eventually made our way upstairs to Cole's bedroom. Nothing happened beyond more kissing and holding each other, but falling asleep in his arms, in his bed, felt monumentally significant. This was intimacy in its truest form, vulnerability, trust, honesty. When I woke the next morning to find Cole's arm draped over my waist and his face buried in my hair, I felt a peace I'd never experienced before. This was what I'd been missing, this sense of belonging, this feeling of home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. I spent most of my free time at the ranch, and slowly, carefully, Cole and I built a routine together. We were still figuring out the physical aspects of our relationship, both of us nervous for different reasons, both of us wanting to take things slow and do them right. But the emotional intimacy we shared grew deeper every day. I started keeping clothes at his place. He gave me a key. We talked about everything from the mundane to the profound, and I discovered that being with Cole was like having a best friend and a partner all rolled into one. But we couldn't hide forever. The first test came when Dr. Morrison asked me about my frequent trips to Blackwater Ranch. "Everything okay out there?" he asked one afternoon, his tone carefully casual. "You've been going out there a lot lately." I could have lied, could have made up something about ongoing health concerns with the livestock. Instead, I took a deep breath and decided to start being honest. "Everything's great, actually. Cole and I have become close, really close. Dr. Morrison studied me for a long moment and I braced myself for judgment. Instead, he just smiled. Good. He seems like a good man. Hardworking, honest, treats his animals well. You could do worse. That was it. No drama, no prying questions, just acceptance. It gave me courage for the harder conversations ahead. I called my mother and asked her to dinner, just the two of us. We met at the local diner and over meatloaf and mashed potatoes I told her the truth. Mom, I need to tell you something important. I'm seeing someone I care about deeply. She smiled, clearly ready to hear about whatever woman I'd finally settled on. That's wonderful, honey. Who is she? Do I know her family? It's not a she, Mom. It's Cole Jameson, the man who bought Blackwater Ranch. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face cycled through a dozen emotions: confusion, shock, disbelief, and something that might have been disappointment. I don't understand, she said finally. You're not. You've always dated girls. I know, and I thought that's who I was, but I've realized that I was just going through the motions trying to be what everyone expected. With Cole, it's different. He's different. I love him, Mom. More silence. Then, to my surprise, tears started rolling down her cheeks. Oh, honey, have you been unhappy all this time, feeling like you had to pretend? I didn't even realize I was pretending, I admitted. Not until I met him. She reached across the table and took my hand. I won't lie and say this isn't a surprise. It is, and I'll need time to process it, but Ryan, you're my son and I want you to be happy if this Cole makes you happy. He does, Mom, happier than I've ever been. She squeezed my hand. Then I'd like to meet him properly, not just seeing him around town, but really meet him as your boyfriend. The words sounded strange coming from her, but she was trying, and that meant everything. I brought Cole to dinner at my mother's house the following Sunday. He showed up with flowers and a bottle of wine, nervous in a way I'd never seen him before. What if she hates me? He muttered as we stood on her porch. What if she thinks I corrupted her son or something? She's not going to hate you, I assured him, squeezing his hand. Just be yourself. The dinner was initially awkward, with my mother asking careful questions and Cole giving careful answers. But gradually, as she saw how attentive he was, how respectful, how clearly he cared for me, she relaxed. By dessert, she was actually laughing at his stories about ranch mishaps, and I saw her looking between us with something that might have been understanding. He's a good one, she told me quietly while Cole helped with the dishes. I can see why you fell for him. You're really okay with this? I asked, needing confirmation. She sighed. I'm adjusting, but yes, I'm okay with it. You light up around him, Ryan. You smile more. You seem settled. That's all I've ever wanted for you, to find someone who makes you happy. Telling my friends was easier. Most of them just shrugged and said they were happy for me. A few asked curious questions about how I'd realized I was attracted to men, and I did my best to explain the unexplainable. One friend, Jake, admitted he'd always wondered. You never seemed really into any of the girls you dated, he said. But with Cole, man, you can't stop talking about him. It's actually kind of adorable. The town gossip mill churned for a few weeks. Meadowbrook was small enough that two men dating was notable, but it was mostly benign curiosity rather than hostility. A few older residents gave us odd looks, but others were surprisingly supportive. The owner of the diner started asking after Cole whenever I came in alone. The hardware store owner joked that we were his best customers with all the ranch projects. Slowly, we found our place in the community as a couple. Cole was braver than me about public affection. He'd hold my hand while we walked through town, put his arm around my shoulders at the feed store, kiss me goodbye in full view of anyone who happened to be watching. At first it made me nervous, hyper-aware of eyes on us, but Cole's confidence was infectious. I spent too many years hiding who I am, he told me. I'm not doing it anymore, and I'm damn sure not hiding how I feel about you. His boldness gave me courage. The first time I initiated a kiss in public at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, Cole's smile was worth any amount of stares. That's my boy, he murmured against my lips, and the pride in his voice made my heart soar. As autumn turned to winter, Cole and I fell into a rhythm that felt like it had always existed. I still maintained my apartment in town, but I spent most nights at the ranch. We'd have dinner together, work on various projects around the property, and spend long evenings talking or watching movies curled up on the couch. Cole taught me how to ride a horse properly, and I taught him about animal first aid beyond the basics. We complemented each other, his strength and my precision, his vision and my practicality, his confidence and my caution. The physical intimacy of our relationship progressed naturally, without pressure or expectation. Cole was patient with my inexperience, gentle when I was nervous, and attentive in ways that made me feel cherished. Our first time together was simultaneously awkward and beautiful, full of whispered encouragement, nervous laughter, and overwhelming emotion. Afterward, lying in his arms while snow fell outside the windows, I felt like I'd finally found the missing piece of myself I hadn't known I was searching for. "I love you," I whispered into the darkness. "I love you so much, Cole." His arms tightened around me. "I love you too, Ryan, more than I thought it was possible to love another person." We started making longer-term plans. Cole wanted to expand the ranch operation in the spring, and I helped him research breeds and market demands. I seriously considered his suggestion about building a veterinary clinic on the property, even going so far as to draw up preliminary plans and cost estimates. It felt right combining our lives, our dreams, our futures into one shared vision. Christmas arrived, and Cole came with me to my mother's house for dinner. She'd invited us both, and watching her include Cole in family traditions, making him try her famous eggnog, insisting he help decorate the tree, warmed my heart. That night after we'd returned to the ranch and were sitting by the fireplace, Cole handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver necklace with a small horseshoe pendant. "It's for luck," he explained, looking almost shy, "and as a reminder that you always have a home here with me, whenever you're ready." I kissed him thoroughly before pulling out my own gift, a leather journal embossed with his initials. "For documenting the ranch," I explained. "All your plans, all your progress. So years from now, you can look back and see how far you've come." He flipped through the blank pages, his expression soft. "We've come," he corrected. "How far we've come." On New Year's Eve, we hosted a small party at the ranch. Just a few friends, some colleagues from the veterinary clinic, a couple of neighboring ranchers. It was the first time we'd opened our home to others as a couple, and I felt a surge of pride watching Cole play host, laughing with guests, his hand finding mine repeatedly throughout the night. When midnight arrived, Cole pulled me out onto the porch away from the crowd. "I have a question to ask you," he said, his breath creating clouds in the cold air. "And you can say no, or tell me it's too soon, or that you need to think about it. But I have to ask." My heart started racing. "Okay. Move in with me, officially. Bring all your stuff from the apartment, give up that lease, and make this your home, our home." He cupped my face in his hands. "I know it's only been a few months. I know you might want more time, but Ryan, I wake up every morning hopping you're here, and I go to sleep every night grateful when you are. I don't want to spend another day without knowing you're coming home to me." Tears pricked my eyes. This was huge. This was commitment. This was choosing a life I'd never imagined for myself just months ago. "Yes," I said, the word coming easily despite the magnitude of it. "Yes, Cole, I want to move in with you." His kiss was fierce and celebratory, and when we returned to the party, our friends noticed something had changed. We didn't announce it. We didn't need to. The joy radiating from both of us was announcement enough. January brought new challenges and new growth. I gave notice on my apartment and started the process of truly moving in. Cole cleared out space in closets and drawers, insisting I take half of everything despite my protests that I didn't need that much room. "This is your home now," he said firmly. "Equal space, equal say in decisions. We're partners, Ryan." I started looking seriously into opening my own practice. Dr. Morrison, bless him, offered to help however he could, even suggesting we could partner in some capacity. Cole and I spent evenings poring over business plans, discussing finances, dreaming about the future. It felt surreal, me, the guy who'd been drifting through life just months ago, now making concrete plans for a future I actually wanted. One night, lying in bed after a particularly productive planning session, I turned to Cole. "Do you ever regret it? That night you told me how you felt, knowing I might have rejected you completely." Cole was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back. "No," he said finally. "Because even if you had rejected me completely, at least I would have been honest. At least I would have tried. And yeah, it would have hurt like hell, but I'd rather hurt from trying than regret never taking the chance." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "Plus, look how it turned out. I got you. I got everything I wanted." "We got everything we wanted," I corrected, echoing his words from Christmas. "This is ours, not just yours." "Ours," he agreed, and the words sounded like a promise. Not everything was perfect, of course. We had our first real fight in February over something stupid. I'd forgot to tell him I'd be late coming home from work, and he'd worried himself sick imagining I'd been in another accident. The argument escalated, fueled by his fear and my defensiveness, and for the first time I saw real anger in Cole's eyes. "You can't just disappear without telling me," he'd shouted. "Do you have any idea what it's like, waiting and worrying, imagining the worst?" "I'm not a child who needs to check in every 5 minutes," I'd shot back. "I'm an adult with a job and responsibilities." We'd both said things we regretted, and I'd ended up driving back to town, planning to spend the night at a friend's place. But halfway there, I realized what I was doing, running again. Letting fear, this time fear of conflict, make my decisions. I turned the truck around and drove back to the ranch. Cole was sitting on the porch steps despite the cold, his head in his hands, and when he heard my truck, he looked up with such relief it made my chest ache. "I'm sorry," we both said simultaneously. "I should have called," I continued. "You're right, it was inconsiderate and scared you needlessly." "And I shouldn't have yelled," Cole said. I can't lose you, Ryan. The thought of something happening to you makes me crazy." We worked through it, talking instead of fighting, listening instead of defending, learning how to communicate even when emotions were high. It wasn't the last fight we'd have, but it taught us how to fight fair, how to come back together after disagreements, how to choose love over pride. In March, we faced a different kind of challenge. Cole's brother called. The family ranch in Texas was struggling again, and they needed financial help. "They want me to loan them money," Cole told me, staring at his phone like it was a snake. "A lot of money." "What do you want to do?" I asked carefully. "I don't know. Part of me wants to help their family, but another part is angry that they only call when they need something, that they haven't bothered to ask about my life or how I'm doing." We talked about it for hours, weighing obligations and emotions and finances. In the end, Cole decided to send some money, not all they'd asked for, but enough to help, with the condition that they needed to work on their relationship. "I told them about you," he admitted afterward. "About us. I said if they wanted to be part of my life, they needed to accept all of me, including the man I love." "How did they take it?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Better than I expected. My oldest brother said he's happy I found someone. My parents were quiet but didn't say anything negative. It's a start." That night, we made love with an intensity that felt different, deeper, more connected, like we were affirming our commitment to each other in the face of all the external pressures and challenges. Afterward, Cole pulled me tight against his chest. "No matter what happens with them, with anyone, you're my family now, Ryan. You're my home." "And you're mine," I whispered back. April brought the start of real construction on my veterinary clinic. Cole hired contractors, and we spent weekends working alongside them, transforming the empty building into a functional medical space. Watching it take shape, the examination rooms, the surgical suite, the waiting area, made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. This was actually happening. I was building a business, a career, a life with the man I loved. Dr. Morrison officially announced our partnership, and several of his longtime clients expressed enthusiasm about having two veterinarians to choose from. I took courses online to ensure I was up to date on all the latest procedures and treatments. Cole supported me through all of it, quizzing me before exams, giving me space when I needed to study, celebrating every small victory. "I'm proud of you," he told me one night after I'd passed a particularly difficult certification exam. "The way you've thrown yourself into this, the way you're building something from nothing, it's incredible to watch." "I learned from the best," I said, gesturing at the ranch around us. "You showed me what's possible when you actually go after what you want." We stood on the porch, looking out at the property we were building together, and I felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This life, this beautiful, unexpected, perfect life, was mine. Ours. And I'd almost missed it by being too afraid to take the chance. May started beautifully. The clinic was nearly finished, scheduled to open in June. The ranch was thriving, with new calves born and the operation running smoothly. Cole and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary of officially being together by taking a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains. Just us. No phones, no responsibilities. We hiked and talked and made love under the stars, and I'd never felt more certain about my choices. But the universe has a way of testing you when you're happiest. The storm came in the form of a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the clinic, doing final touches on the paint job when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Ryan Foster?" an unfamiliar woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Sarah Chen from County General Hospital. I'm calling about Cole Jameson. He's been in an accident." The world tilted. My phone clattered to the floor. Somewhere distant, I heard myself asking questions. What happened? Is he okay? Which hospital? But it felt like I was underwater, sounds muffled and strange. Cole had been helping a neighbor move cattle when a bull had charged. He'd been gored in the side and kicked in the head. He was in surgery, critical condition. I needed to come now. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. Don't remember parking or finding the surgical waiting area. I remember my mother arriving. Someone must have called her, and wrapping her arms around me while I shook uncontrollably. I remember Dr. Morrison showing up, having heard the news through the small-town grapevine. I remember sitting in that horrible plastic chair for 4 hours, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in, making bargains and promises if Cole would just be okay. When the surgeon finally emerged, her face was carefully neutral. "He made it through surgery," she said, and I almost collapsed with relief. "But the next 24 hours are critical. He lost a lot of blood and there was trauma to his head. We won't know the full extent of the damage until he wakes up." If he wakes up. She didn't say it, but I heard it anyway. They let me see him once he was settled in ICU. Nothing could have prepared me for it. Cole, so large and vital and full of life, looking small and fragile in that hospital bed. Tubes and wires everywhere, monitors beeping. His face was bruised and swollen, and seeing him like that broke something fundamental inside me. I pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand, the one without an IV, and held it like a lifeline. "You can't leave me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Do you hear me, Cole Jameson? You can't leave me. We have a life to build, a clinic to open, a future to live, so you fight, okay? You fight and come back to me." I talked to him for hours, told him about finishing the clinic, about the funny thing Dr. Morrison's cat had done, about the plans I had for the small garden behind the ranch house. I told him I loved him approximately 1,000 times. I told him about all the things we still had to do together, travel plans we discussed, renovations we hadn't started, dreams we hadn't fulfilled. "Remember that night in the barn?" I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "When you said no one else would ever fill me like you do. You were right. You've filled spaces in my life I didn't know were empty. You've made me complete. So please, please come back to me." The hours blurred together. My mother brought me coffee and sandwiches I couldn't eat. Dr. Morrison sat with me for a while, offering quiet support. Other friends from town stopped by, shocked and worried. The whole community seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see if Cole would survive. On the second day, his vitals started to improve. The swelling in his brain began to go down. The doctors spoke in cautious optimisms and careful maybes. On the third day, his eyes fluttered open. "Ryan." His voice was barely a whisper, rough from intubation, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "I'm here," I said, gripping his hand. "I'm right here, Cole. You're okay. You're going to be okay." He tried to smile, and even weak and battered, it lit up his face. "Told you, no one else feels you like me." Despite everything, I laughed, a broken, relieved, joyful sound. "Yeah, you did, and you were absolutely right." His recovery was slow. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and then he came home to the ranch with strict orders for bed rest and limited activity. I became his nurse, his caretaker, his constant companion. I postponed the clinic opening without hesitation. Nothing mattered except getting Cole healthy again. Those weeks taught me things about love I'd never understood before. That love wasn't just the passionate moments or the grand gestures. It was changing bandages and helping with physical therapy exercises and sitting patiently through pain and frustration. It was being there for the hard parts, not just the easy ones. Cole struggled with his forced inactivity. He was used to working from dawn to dusk, and being confined to bed made him irritable and restless. But slowly, day by day, he healed. The bruises faded, the stitches came out, his strength returned, and through it all our bond deepened in ways I couldn't have anticipated. "Thank you," he said one night as I helped him up the stairs to bed, the first time he'd been strong enough to manage the climb. "For staying, for taking care of me, for not running when things got hard." "Where else would I be?" I asked simply. "You're my person, Cole, my home. I'm not going anywhere." "Not even when I'm grumpy and impossible," he tried to joke, but I heard the vulnerability underneath. "Especially then," I said firmly. "For better or worse, remember, we're in this together." "We're not married," he pointed out. "Not yet," I found myself saying, and the words hung in the air between us, full of implication and promise. By late June, Cole was mostly recovered, though the doctors warned he needed to take it easy for several more months. The clinic finally opened in July, and the whole town turned out for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Cole stood beside me, still moving a bit carefully but there, solid and real and alive. As I cut the ribbon and people cheered, I caught his eye. He was looking at me with such pride and love that I felt it like a physical touch. This was our dream made real. Our life built together through challenges and triumphs, fear and courage, loss and love. The clinic thrived from the start. Turns out people in the community had been waiting for a second vet option, and my patient approach and thorough care won over clients quickly. Dr. Morrison and I made a good team, complementing each other's strengths. And coming home to Cole every night, telling him about my day, listening to his updates about the ranch, it felt like the life I was always meant to have. In August, on the anniversary of the night Cole had first confessed his feelings, I took him back to that barn where it had all started. I'd spent weeks planning, getting everything perfect. Lights strung overhead, creating a warm glow. A picnic dinner laid out on blankets, and in my pocket a ring. "What's all this?" Cole asked, looking around in wonder. "I wanted to recreate something," I said, my heart pounding. "The night that changed everything. The night you were brave enough to tell me the truth, even knowing I might run." "Ryan, let me finish," I interrupted gently. "That night you said something I'll never forget. You said no one else would ever fill me like you do. And Cole, you were absolutely right. You filled my life with love and purpose and joy. You've made me braver, stronger, better. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and truly loved." I pulled out the ring, a simple platinum band engraved with the coordinates of Blackwater Ranch. "So I have a question for you, Cole Jameson. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life filling your days the way you filled mine?" Cole's eyes were shining with tears, and his smile was brighter than all the lights I'd strung up. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Ryan, 1,000 times yes." I slipped the ring onto his finger, and then he was pulling me into his arms, kissing me like he was trying to pour everything he felt into that single moment. When we finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I love you so much," he whispered. "I loved you from the moment you stepped into my barn looking competent and adorable, and I'm going to love you until my last breath and beyond." "Is that a promise?" I asked, echoing his words from that rainy night in the barn. "That's a promise," he confirmed. "No one else will ever fill you like I do, Ryan Foster, and no one else will ever fill me like you do." We lay on those blankets under the stars, talking about wedding plans and our future and all the adventures still to come. We'd faced so much already, fear and doubt and actual physical danger, and we'd come through it stronger, more committed, more certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. Epilogue 1 year later. Our wedding was small but perfect, held right here on the ranch in early October when the leaves were changing colors and the air had that crisp bite of autumn. My mother cried happy tears. Cole's family came, all of them, even his parents, who'd clearly been working on acceptance, and showed up with genuine smiles. Dr. Morrison officiated, because of course he did. And when we exchanged vows in front of everyone we loved, promising to fill each other's lives with love and support and adventure. I felt complete in a way I'd never imagined possible. Clinic continued to grow, and I hired an additional assistant to help manage the workload. The ranch expanded too, with Cole implementing all those plans we dreamed about together. We built the chicken coop, planted the orchard, created a life that was busy and challenging and absolutely perfect. We had our struggles, what couple doesn't? Arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes, disagreements about finances, moments of frustration and fatigue. But we always came back to each other. Always chose love over pride, communication over silence, togetherness over distance. On a Tuesday morning in late September, exactly 1 year after the barn proposal, I woke up to find Cole already awake, watching me with that soft expression that still made my heart race. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, stretching in the morning light. "Just how lucky I am," he said simply, "that you walked into my barn that day, that I was brave enough to tell you the truth, that you were brave enough to come back to me." "We're both pretty lucky," I agreed, pulling him close. "And brave." "And filled," he added with a grin. "Completely and totally filled." I laughed and kissed him, and in that moment I thought about the person I'd been just over a year ago. Lost, lonely, going through the motions of a life that didn't quite fit. And I thought about who I was now, married to my best friend, running a successful practice, part of a community that accepted and celebrated us. Cole had been right that rainy night in the barn. No one else could have filled me like he did. And I hoped more than anything that I filled him just the same. That I gave him the love and support and partnership he deserved. That I made his life as complete as he made mine. "Hey," Cole said softly, pulling me from my thoughts. "Where'd you go?" "Nowhere," I said honestly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And as we lay there in the morning light in the home we'd built together, I knew with absolute certainty that was true. This was my home. Cole was my home. And I was finally, completely, perfectly filled. The future stretched out before us, full of possibility and challenge and adventure. We'd face it all together. Two men who'd been brave enough to reach for love even when it seemed impossible. And we'd keep filling each other's lives, day after day, year after year, for as long as we both lived. Because that's what love does. It fills the empty spaces. It makes you whole. And when you find someone who fills you the way Cole filled me, the way I hoped I filled him, you hold on tight and never let go. The end. Closing message. Did this story fill your heart the way Cole filled Ryan's? If you loved this emotional journey of fear, courage, and finding love in the most unexpected places, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story.